Hello, I'm Lydia Harrison, MW. I'm Head of Education and Events at WSET School London and one of our wine educators. In this video, we're going to be looking at the wines of New Zealand. New Zealand has two islands, the North Island and the South Island, and is situated in the Southern Hemisphere. First of all, let's look at the natural factors that impact grape growing in New Zealand. The climate here is maritime. You've got two islands surrounded by the ocean, which obviously has a big impact on the grape growing. It gives a moderating influence with cool ocean breezes, lots of rainfall, and gives a long growing season so you can ripen the grapes well into the autumn. However, because it's a maritime climate, there is lots of rain, which happens during the growing season and all year round. This is why a lot of the vineyard regions are situated on the eastern side of the islands, because they're a little bit drier than the western side. The rain does bring its challenges. If you have damp, humid conditions, this promotes rot and fungal diseases, and it can be very wet. To combat this, the grape growers will often train the vines with VSP, vertical shoot positioning, which is where you train the vines up, like this, which promotes the airflow around the grapes, helping to retain the health of the grapes. They can also treat the fungal diseases with fungicide sprays. These can be conventional or organic. New Zealand has lots of sunshine, rainfall and fertile soils. So if you have a lot of all of these inputs, they can ripen a lot of grapes from their vines. Therefore, they often have quite big vines, which can ripen a larger amount of grapes than you could find in other regions or countries. The North Island is warmer as you're closer to the equator, whereas the regions in the South Island, as you head further away from the equator, are cooler. The exception to the maritime climate is the region of Central Otago at the bottom of the South Island, which has a cool continental climate because it's encircled by mountains. This protects it from the ocean influences, gives it a warm summer period, cold winters, and high diurnal range. Let's look at the grape varieties grown in New Zealand. These are all grape varieties that are international and grown throughout the world. Let's start with Sauvignon Blanc, which produces an iconic wine style and is very famously planted in Marlborough. It produces wines that are often single varietal, 100% from Sauvignon Blanc, and intensely aromatic, with flavours such as grapefruit, passion fruit, gooseberry and grass. It has high acidity, is made in a dry style, and is typically unoaked and typically unaged, made for early drinking. Another popular white grape variety grown in New Zealand is Chardonnay, and this is used to produce both still and sparkling wines. In Marlborough, which is on the northern tip of the South Island, which is cooler, it tends to produce wines with high acidity and more citrusy flavours. Whereas in Gisborne, in the North Island, where it's warmer, you tend to get riper, maybe stone fruit or even tropical fruit flavours, and a little bit more alcohol and body in these wines. Premium Chardonnays throughout New Zealand will typically be fermented and or aged in oak, which will contribute flavours of vanilla, cedar and toast, and age-worthy wines will also develop tertiary aromas such as nuts and honey. Riesling and Pinot Gris are two other white grape varieties that are also grown in New Zealand in smaller quantities. These wines often will have some residual sugar and be off-dry in style. This can complement the high acidity of the Riesling and the citrus and aromatic floral flavours. Pinot Gris here tends to have riper stone fruit flavours and a little bit more body and alcohol than you'd find in a typical, inexpensive Italian Pinot Grigio version. Both grape varieties are often situated in the South Island in regions like Central Otago. For the red wines, Pinot Noir is really popular throughout New Zealand and makes wines with a high reputation. It ripens early, so it suits the cooler climate locations and is found in regions like Martinborough in the southern part of the North Island, Marlborough in the northern tip of the South Island, and Central Otago at the most southerly area of the South Island. Its characters are lots of red fruit flavours like strawberry, cranberry, high acidity, and sometimes also floral characteristics and some black fruit flavours. The wines are typically pale in colour with fine, soft tannins and medium-bodied. Whole bunch is a winemaking technique typically used for Pinot Noir, which accentuates the freshness of these wines. For the premium wines, oak aging is also very common. This gives secondary characteristics of cedar and vanilla spice and also softens the tannins. Oak maturation will also allow oxygen into the wines, which starts to evolve the tertiary characters of things like forest floor, earth and mushroom. The other black grape varieties common in New Zealand are Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot and Syrah. And these are typically grown in the North Island where it's warmer and which suits these thick-skinned black grape varieties which need more heat to ripen. Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon are often blended together and they make Bordeaux-style blends in the Hawke's Bay region around Napier in the North Island. The Cabernet Sauvignon will bring lots of black fruit and herbaceous characters to the wine, add high acidity and high tannins, whereas the Merlot will bring some red fruit, body and alcohol and soften the acid and the tannins of the Cabernet Sauvignon. Syrah is also really popular here and is used for single varietal wines which often display the typical black pepper, spice notes and black fruit characteristics of Syrah. It'll tend to have medium to high acid, medium to high tannins, and the more premium wines for both Syrah and Cabernet and Merlot will be aged in oak because this softens the tannins, adds complex secondary notes of vanilla and cloves, and also helps to develop some of those tertiary aromas that you get with some further aging, such as tobacco and leather. There's a particular area in Hawke's Bay called Gimlet Gravels, which is renowned for producing premium red wines, because unsurprisingly, the soil type here is gravel. And this is really well draining, heat retaining, which helps to ripen the grapes and produce premium reds. We're now going to look at what happens in the cellar for your white wines. Sauvignon Blanc is an aromatic white grape, so winemaking techniques typically employed for this will be some skin contact or cold soaking before fermentation. So crushing the grapes and then letting the juice stay in contact with the skins to absorb all of the aromatics before pressing and fermenting. The wine is then fermented at cooler temperatures, usually around 15 degrees, because this helps to retain all the lovely aromatics and fruit intensity of the white wine. Similarly then, malolactic conversion and oak maturation are typically avoided to preserve all the fresh primary fruit aromas of the grape variety. And these are usually bottled young and unaged. In contrast, for winemaking for grapes like Chardonnay, skin contact is typically avoided because it's a non-aromatic grape variety. And fermentation temperatures are usually warmer, again because you don't need to preserve any delicate floral aromatics, and so the warmer characters can actually produce more savoury flavours and aromas in the wine. They'll often also employ lots of secondary winemaking techniques such as fermenting and or maturing in oak. This will give secondary flavours such as vanilla, cloves and sweet spice to the wines. They will also typically do malolactic conversion. This softens the acidity of the wines and imparts dairy flavours such as cream and butter. Also, another technique very commonly employed with Chardonnay is lees aging. This is where you will stir the lees and these will impart texture to the wines as well as flavours like bread and biscuit. For your premium Chardonnays, typically all three of these techniques will be employed. So malolactic conversion, fermentation and maturation in oak and some lees aging. For the red wines, winemaking techniques will vary depending on the style of wine that they want to make. For Pinot Noir and also for some Syrah, whole bunch fermentation is quite a popular technique. This is where some whole bunches, intact grapes will go into the vat and this can accentuate the freshness and bright fruit flavours of the wine. For earlier drinking red wines, they will generally ferment at cooler temperatures because this will limit the extraction of tannins and retain a lot of the fresh primary fruit. They'll have limited or no oak aging and will be bottled young for early drinking. In contrast, if you want a more premium age-worthy red, then they will generally be fermented at warmer temperatures. This is because this will extract more colour, flavour and particularly tannins from the wine, and they will have more frequent winemaking techniques such as pumping over or punching down to increase the extraction of these tannins. They will then also be aged in oak to give more complex secondary characteristics and also to allow some oxygen to start developing those lovely tertiary aromas of things like leather and tobacco. The wines can then continue to age in bottle and develop really premium, complex flavours. All right, that's everything about New Zealand. We're now going to look at an example theory question. So the question here is, explain why Pinot Noir is suited to growing in Central Otago. This question is worth 6 marks, and the command verb here is explain. So it's really important that in the answer you explain effectively why Pinot Noir is suited. You don't just talk about Pinot Noir or Central Otago, you need to link the two together. Which is what we've done effectively here in our answer. So it starts with, Central Otago has a cool continental climate which suits Pinot Noir as it is an early ripening, thin-skinned variety. That way we've linked the climate of Central Otago and specifically stated why Pinot Noir is suited to this environment. We then go on to say, due to the latitude, it has warm summers and lots of sunlight intensity. However, it is moderated by the high diurnal range and has a range of aspects and altitudes. This will ensure that Pinot Noir retains high acidity, yet makes wines which often have high alcohol and concentrated ripe red fruit flavours. Again, you can see in the answer there how we've taken some of the aspects of the Central Otago growing conditions and effectively linked them to the impact on Pinot Noir and how it helps to successfully grow that grape variety. I hope that all is really helpful for you in your studies. Thank you for watching.